What are we doing here? Is that how it was actually called?
That was there was a station in Indianapolis broadcasting the game that wasn't receiving Sean McDonough's call. So the first 30 seconds of the game, Carolina scores, and you're only getting the game audio. It was incredible, Kevin.
But
Chills.
If you were watching here in D.C., you were getting Sean McDonough's call.
Correct.
Only in Indianapolis. The Indianapolis ABC affiliate,
yeah,
I would
basically.
imagine.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Was it a good game?
Yes, dude. It was 5-4.
I watched a lot of it. I didn't.
It was 5-4. It was a back-and-forth contest. The Canes opened the scoring 2-0 by Nick Ehlers, a guy that the Caps were trying to sign in free agency at the beginning of this year before the season started, and it's paying off in spades for Carolina. But Vegas came away with the win. It was just a beautiful back-and-forth contest. Each time a team scored, the other team would come back and answer. Fantastic start to the Stanley Cup final, Kev.
Do tell. That was a good recap from Max to kick off the show on Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals. One of the things I did notice, let me just tell you real quickly. If you guys aren't watching Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV, you're missing a great show. This is season 2, and my wife and I caught up on that last night. We had 2 episodes to catch up on, and the last episode, which is the penultimate episode, next to last episode of this season, was incredible. John Hamm is great in everything he does. And he's so good in this. I will not miss the NBA Finals tonight. I will not miss that. But, I watched, so I flipped it on in between the 2 episodes we were watching just to see what the score was. It was 3-3 when I flipped it on after 2 periods, which had me thinking maybe I should commit to watching the third period in a 3-3 game, but I didn't. I watched Friends and Neighbors instead, and then I saw the final afterwards. And the thing that I did not know was that guy Tortorella is a coach of one of the 2 teams. I mean,
he signed late in the season.
Yeah, I feel like Tortorella, whether he's coached, I don't know, the Rangers. I know the Rangers he coached against the Caps in the playoffs. I know that he coached, I think, Columbus.
Correct.
The year the Caps won the title in that first round, which, if you recall, and I know you do, the Caps were lucky to get out of that first round series with Columbus.
Thought it was over.
Really lucky. But am I right? Tortorella has coached against the Caps a number of times in the postseason.
Very well, yes. He's back in the day. He was me and my dad. He's kind of been the Caps boogeyman, especially in the early 2010s when the Caps were. They were supposed to be at the top of the league, and Tortorella would always find a way to just dash our hopes.
Yeah. Well, but I'm looking at his thing now. I just pulled up his resume. It looks like he lost to Washington every single time he faced him.
See, it didn't. He lost. It never felt that way.
He coached the Rangers in 08-09, lost in the conference quarterfinals to Washington. He coached the Rangers in 2010-2011, lost in conference quarterfinals to Washington. Coached Columbus, then I was right, 2017-2018, lost in the first round to Washington. So he's 0-3 in the postseason against the Caps.
That way, which is really weird looking back on it.
Let me just look previously. Yeah, that's it. He was the head coach of Tampa Bay in 2004 when they won the Stanley Cup. So he's got 1 Stanley Cup. But he's kind of a fiery guy, and some of his press conferences over the years, you hockey people are going to know what,
hates
like,
the media.
Come on, Sheehan, get it together. This dude's like, legendary for his rants. But he's been around for a long time, and it just seems like he was always in a series against the Caps, but it's 3 times and he was 0-3. So there you go. All right. So game 1, exciting. And it goes to Vegas. Carolina was the favorite in this series. Am I right about that? I think that's right.
Yeah. Vegas snuck into the playoffs. Like they finished below a lot of teams in the Metro that didn't even make it, including the Caps. So it's a lot of people are breaking down the playoff format going into this Cup final as well.
Right. Sabah's already weighed in on the show this morning. I love Friends and Neighbors too. Yeah. Friends and Neighbors is really, really good. Sabah, you got to stop sending me these random people on X and act like it's a report. There are so many people in my life, both personally and then via this show, that get so duped over and over again, or somehow believe that if somebody tweets something out, like it's actual fact, or this is somebody's opinion we should care about. I would say that 95% of what you read on X, you have to question the veracity of, and then you really have to question whether or not it really matters what that person is saying. I would be in that 95%. Like, who cares what I think? On X, on Twitter. That's why I do so little of it. I'm excited about tonight. I'm not going to lie to you. I got this from Darren. Darren writes, full disclosure, Kevin, I don't like the NBA, but I bent to your obsessive push to get us to watch the playoffs, and now I can't wait for the finals. When was the last time the NBA finals had a matchup this exciting? Good question. I mean, I think that 2 years ago, the Celtics and the Mavericks, that was an interesting matchup because of Luka. Just the Luka in the finals, I think, added some juice to a Boston team that was looking to finally win one with Tatum and Brown. But it doesn't have the juice that this one has. Last year, Oklahoma City, Indiana, I mean, you're talking about two small markets, basically. The year before that was Denver, Miami. Yeah. Golden State, Boston, 2022. There was some juice for that because Golden State, people thought, their days of winning championships were over. And they had that run in 2022, which was pretty exciting to watch with the core of their, dynasty team. And that was a very exciting series, and I think a lot of people feel like Boston was the better team going in, and they were the favorite, if my memory serves me correctly. The year before that was Milwaukee, Phoenix, Lakers, Heat in the bubble. 2019, I don't think a lot of people were juiced for Toronto, Golden State, even though Golden State was looking at that point for a three-peat, and they had already won 3 of the previous 4 with the one loss coming to Cleveland. Certainly, since the Golden State Cleveland run of 4 straight finals, that 2015 through 2018, where we saw Golden State and Cleveland every single year. Yeah, this is anticipated. Darren, this is a finals that has some juice to it. And it's not just because one of the teams is a New York team, and it's the Knicks. Because the Knicks are, regardless of their lack of true championship pedigree over the last 50 some odd years, they are one of the brands in the sport. They're not the biggest brand in the sport. The biggest brand in the sport is Los Angeles, the Lakers. The Lakers, I think, would be the biggest brand in the NBA, followed by, I'm going to guess, the Celtics, as a number 2. And then after that, I don't know. I mean, Golden State, because of what they've done over the last decade. Who else is a true, and the Bulls to a certain extent, but not really anymore. The Celtics and the Lakers are the brands that have held up over a long period of time in the NBA. They are kind of the Cowboys equivalent, with just more winning, like a lot more winning, of the NBA. And maybe, if you want to throw, I don't know, I hate throwing the Patriots into there, but the Patriots obviously have become a massive brand over the last 25 years. More than that now. 25 exactly, actually, right? We're coming up on the 25th year anniversary of their first Super Bowl season with Brady. That the Knicks are a brand, though. They are. They're a destination. The Miami Heat, the Knicks, these are destinations for NBA players, even though it's not like, the Knicks have been a big winner. I'll tell you what, as I think about this series, and I'll have a pick later on in the show, I was absolutely convinced before this postseason began that Oklahoma City was the best team and that they would prevail and they would repeat as champs. I didn't think anybody could beat them 4 out of 7, but the Spurs did. And then I certainly felt as we got into the Western Conference Finals that the winner would win the title, that the Western Conference Finals was the de facto championship series. By the way, Wemby sort of reacted that way. Interesting, and I'll get to this not that long from now, but some of you didn't like the way that I didn't think it was a direct criticism of Wemby. It was an observation of how emotional he was after Game 7, and I thought it was different. And I thought it was a bit too premature to weep uncontrollably after you've won a conference championship. But maybe he viewed the Western Conference Finals like a lot of other people did during it, and that is the winner of it is going to win the championship. But they still are going to go ahead and play the championship series anyway. But somebody weighed in, a former champion himself in that sport, weighed in on Wemby's emotional state after Saturday night, and you'll hear that coming up shortly. But I don't feel the same way I felt before the postseason or before the Western Conference Finals. I think this is going to be a very competitive series, and it's not going to shock me if the Knicks win the championship. It isn't. I think that when you talk about a team that has not lost a game in 41 days, that's really incredible when you think about it. I know the NBA playoffs take forever. They do. But the New York Knickerbockers in this postseason have not lost a playoff game in 41 days. April 23rd was their last loss. They lost in Game 3 to the Atlanta Hawks. C.J. McCollum had a big game. They lost by a point. It was their second straight loss by a point. Since then, they have gone on to win 11 straight playoff games by an average of 23.8 points per game. They've only had one game of the 11 that wasn't a double-digit margin win, and that was a 6-point Game 2 win against the 76ers in the conference semifinals. Now, they did go to overtime against the Cavs in Game 1, but they won that game by 11 in overtime. Yes, that's different. That game was the most competitive game that they have had. But, I mean, the scores of some of their games, they won a game by 51 against Atlanta to close them out. Remember, they had like 90 at halftime. They won a game by 39 against the Sixers, by 30 against the Sixers, by 37 in the closeout game against the Cavs, which I talked about yesterday. Truly was one of the more dispirited, gutless performances by a team that I think I've ever seen in a closeout game. God, James Harden is just insufferable to watch. I don't know how anybody would want that guy on their team, because you cannot win with James Harden on your basketball team in the postseason in terms of trying to win a title. And then that was, of course, surpassed by the Chet Holmgren performance in Game 7 on Saturday night. But when you look at the Knicks and you consider a team that has not lost a game in 41 days, 41 days. And by the way, they have not played a game since May 25th. So we're talking about, 9 days basically in between the games. They had the same thing against Cleveland. They had to wait 9 days before Game 1 against Cleveland after they finished off Philly in 4. The Knicks faced the 76ers in the second round after the 76ers played a 7-game series against the Celtics. They faced the Cleveland Cavaliers after the Cavaliers played a 7-game series against the Pistons. And they're facing the Spurs in the finals after the Spurs went 7 with Oklahoma City. And they have had 9-day rests before their last 2 series. So we'll see what happens tonight. San Antonio's a 4.5, 5-point favorite. They're basically like a minus 200 favorite for the series. I'm not touching this series. I'm not playing it. Part of me wants to take the price with the Knicks at plus 190, 193, something like that. Because I do think it's possible. I didn't a week ago. I didn't 2 weeks ago. I do now The Knicks are playing different basketball than they played last year in the postseason. The ball's moving more than it did last year, or even than it did early in the postseason against Atlanta when they were down 2-1. Let's not forget, in the first round, the Knicks were down 2-1 to the Hawks. And then they just absolutely obliterated them in 3 straight games. But the ball moves more. They've got the injury with Mitchell Robinson. They've got, they do still have that, ability to basically go pure Jalen Brunson ISO ball, 4 guys standing around watching after they seek out the matchup they want. I'll tell you what, man, it's a different defensive team they will be facing. That's for sure. They didn't get the Pistons, who were good defensively. They got the Cavaliers, who were not good defensively. So this is going to be a much bigger test, but I'm looking forward to it. As far as the most anticipated since, I don't know, man. I guess it's back to, Golden State, Cleveland, round 4. Because those were such anticipated series going into them. The Spurs, have some cachet because of all of their titles and, their one dynastic run, with Pop and with Duncan and with, early on with David Robinson, Ginobili, Parker, the whole gang. Somebody, by the way, said about, it was a conversation that I was having with Tommy yesterday, Lavero. Lavero got really upset and got into a Twitter fight with Fran Fraschilla, the ESPN college basketball analyst. I actually like Fran Fraschilla. He also has done a good job over the years of scouting international players and being sort of the voice, or the expert voice, if you will, on international players for ESPN. And apparently he tweeted out the Knicks all-time Mount Rushmore, which excluded Willis Reed, which basically, had Tommy retweeting it and calling Fran Fraschilla a child. But anyway, that conversation morphed into a conversation about San Antonio's Mount Rushmore and whether or not it's too early to put Wemby on it. And of course it's too early to put Wemby on it. I mean, you got to let, a couple of years and this is his first playoffs, his first. And he hasn't won a title yet. Not yet. But the Spurs Mount Rushmore, the first 3 are really easy. It would be Tim Duncan, George Gervin, and David Robinson. And then the debate would be, is it Parker or is it Ginobili? That's probably the conversation there on the Spurs Mount Rushmore. I don't know. Big Tony can weigh in. Big Tony, of course, is the biggest front-running sports fan in the history of this station's listener base. He is a Steelers fan, a Spurs fan, a Montreal Canadiens fan, a Duke basketball. I mean, the list goes on. But I would imagine he would, if Big Tony's listening, he can call the hotline. So let me know if he's on it, Max.
I'll keep an eye out.
But I would guess that he would put Ginobili on it as the 4th. That's what I'm going to guess. But it's too early on Wemby. Too early on Wemby. I will say this about the NBA Finals. I'm very much excited to sit down. I told my wife last night, I'm like, because we've had a couple of things that we've been trying to schedule with get-togethers with family members, et cetera, for dinner. And I said, Wednesday night's off. Why? NBA Finals Game 1. She said, really? Really? Doesn't it start at 9 o'clock or 9? She doesn't know anything. I'm like, it starts at 8. I actually think it starts at 8:30. And she said, all right, what about Friday night? I said, nope, that's Game 2. But did you know that these NBA Finals, it's weird, man. I don't get this, but they give that extra day for the travel day. It's 2-2, 1-1-1. There was that long stretch of 30-something years of 2-3-2 being the format, so you didn't travel as much. But they went back to 2-2, 1-1-1 a few years ago, meaning the first 2 at one venue, the next 2 at the next venue, then it switches for Game 5, 6, and 7. So they give that extra travel day in between games 1 and 2 in San Antonio tonight and Friday night, and Game 3, which is in the Garden on Monday night. That means there's no NBA playoffs on Saturday night or Sunday night. So you have no NBA over the weekend. I would love to be in some of those conversations. You guys know how much I love like the NFL schedule and how that gets put together. I'd love to know the conversations about whether or not anybody suggests, it's kind of a risk to go a Saturday and a Sunday, a full weekend without a game. Like out of sight, out of mind. There's only one product in this country that is never out of sight, out of mind, and that is the NFL. College football, number 2. Football's never out of sight, out of mind. But the NBA, the NHL for sure, Major League Baseball, you got to be careful, man. You got to be careful. I mean, they got a 7th and deciding game Saturday night. That was huge. But did you know that if those NBA finals, if the NBA Western Conference finals had only gone 4 or 5 games, the NBA finals has a hard and fast start date, which is June 3rd, tonight. We've waited a week in between conference finals and NBA finals games. I think that's ridiculous. Way back in the day, and I'm talking about 70s, 80s, maybe into the early 90s, you started the NBA finals 2 to 3 days max after the last conference finals games. There was not a hard and fast date to the start. But because of media, the whole thing, promotion, yeah, that's what you get. I'm loving the fact that I know some of you would love it to be on NBC, and Tirico's great. But my guy Legler, he is, I think, the absolute number one X's and O's analyst doing basketball at almost any level, but definitely at the NBA level. So he'll be on the call with Mike Breen and Richard Jefferson, the 3 of them, for this best of 7. This is going to be a much different broadcast than in recent years where Breen had Van Gundy, he had Doris Burke. We're not going to get, the Van Gundy where, 3 times during a game he talks about why not, have a 4-point shot, or why not change the rule to 3 to make 2. Like he's, I couldn't stand listening to him. By the way, he's been coaching the last few years. He's been the assistant to Ty Lue in Los Angeles with the Clippers. I actually really like Stan Van Gundy. I think Stan Van Gundy is excellent. But Legs and Jefferson, you're getting great basketball analysis because Legs knows what he's looking at. And so he'll be on the call tonight, game 1. I'll have picks later on in the show. Max will make a pick. But again, I do not think it is foregone conclusion that San Antonio is going to win this series. And when this series gets back to the Garden on Monday night, the Garden for game 3, even if you couldn't care less about the postseason, especially if it's 1-1, like if they get a split in San Antonio, it will be one of the most electric environments that we've seen in team sports in a long time. That is the Mecca. There is nothing like it in terms of the crowd and the atmosphere and the feeling. You can feel it through the television in these games that they've been playing, and they haven't had a lot of them. That's the one downside to the Knicks' run here is they've been so dominant. They've played the minimum number in the last 2 series of home games, because they had the home court advantage, and both of them could have played 4, only played 2 each. But man, Monday night next week at the Garden, I really am rooting for the Knicks to get one of these first 2 so that we can see a game 3 where Knicks fans are not just ginned up for their first finals game since 1999, but they're ginned up for the possibility of the Knicks actually winning this series. Excited about it. We'll get back to this later on in the show. Football talk next, but let me just mention that Window Nation's got a great deal going on right now during the month of June. This is your opportunity here with just a few more cool days left before the summer heat arrives to swap out your older, inefficient windows with newer, very efficient windows that will keep the air conditioning from running 24/7 to keep your house cool. When that's happening, it's usually the windows that are the issue. I don't know if everybody understands that, but when your air conditioning doesn't turn off on super hot days to keep your house cool, it's because your windows are letting too much of that air out because they're older and inefficient. You can swap those older windows out with newer windows. That's my recommendation. Go to windownation.com or call them at 866-90-NATION to get their buy four, get four free sale. That means every four you buy, the next four are free. So you're paying half price for your new windows. In addition, if you choose to finance the purchase, no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest for 2 full years. I've been working with Window Nation as an endorser for now coming up on 18 years. I promise you it will work out. It does every single time for friends, family members, and listeners to this show. This sale ends soon. Get it done before the heat arrives. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com to schedule your free in-home estimate. Window Nation is a proud partner of the Wounded Warrior Project. This from Pete. Pete writes, did you see the contract for Drake London? I'm assuming you now think he's the third best receiver in the NFL. Ha, ha, ha. You can't possibly think that he's better than Terry. It's that time of the year, isn't it? Wide receiver talk. Yeah, I actually do think London's better than Terry. I do. Drake London signed a contract extension in Atlanta, a 4-year, $141 million contract extension, which includes $100 million in guaranteed money. That is going to put him, in terms of the guaranteed, right in that top three. The average annual does, as Pete wrote, put London at number 3 behind Chase and Najigba. Remember, Najigba just signed that deal. His average is $42.15 million per year. Chase is at $40.25 million per year, and London is now at $35.25 million per year, followed by Jefferson and Lamb to round out the top 5 in the NFL. Yeah, I'm a big Drake London fan. The only problem with London is that there are some nicks here and there that he ends up having. He had a great year with Kirk in 2024. He caught 100 balls for nearly 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. Last year, he was banged up a bunch and missed 5 games, but I don't think he finished another 2 or 3 and ended up with 68 catches. But Drake London is one of those guys you can, look to dominate a game. I do believe that. He's 6'4", he's 220. He's a team guy. He will block. I like Drake London. He was the guy that Washington really wanted in that 2022 draft. Mentioned it many times. If he doesn't go number 8 to Atlanta, Washington selects Drake London. I had Scott Turner on the show not that long ago, a few weeks, maybe it was a week after the draft, and Turner said, I said, wasn't London your guy? And he said, yes, Drake London was our number 1 guy. We weren't, very confident he would make it to us, but we really liked Drake London in that draft. Yeah, I would definitely, Pete, take Drake London over Terry McLaurin. But again, that doesn't mean I don't think Terry's good. Like, I just, this isn't binary. Like, to me, let me just look through the standings here. And I would go, I got to write some of these down. I would go, first of all, I do think Jefferson is the best receiver in the NFL. Okay. I think Justin Jefferson is the best route runner. I think he scares the defense the most. I think Chase is better after the catch. And I do think that there are 3. Here are the 3. Actually, there are 4 now, because I think I've got to put JSN into the conversation of the elite receivers, the truly elite receivers. To me, it's Jefferson, Chase, Nakua, and Smith-Njigba. Those are, I would go in order, JJ, Chase, Nakua, JSN. That would be my top 4. Do you have a problem with that, Max? Or do you want to put somebody else into that mix? In terms of the top 4 in the league, you can move the elite line down to 6 or 7 if you want, but those are my top 4 in the league.
So give me your top 4 one more time, because I was doing running the Gill thing.
Jefferson, Chase, Nakua, JSN.
I can't make an argument against any of them. I mean, there are guys I would throw into the conversation, like I'd probably put CD in there. I know you're not a huge fan, but
I'm not. But you know what? I've come around to understanding what he does to defenses. He just drops too many balls for me.
Yeah.
His body language drives me nuts.
Understandable.
There's a lot about Lamb that I don't like, but I do get the fear that he puts in to defensive coordinators in their lead up, especially with Pickens on the other side. Now, I'm not, I mean, I would have Lamb ahead of Terry now. I would. He's younger too. So you'd put Lamb into that mix?
I would throw CD Lamb and Amon-Ra into the mix, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily put them in my top 4. I would
Amon-Ra was the one that I was like contemplating because I think he would be next in line for me.
Yeah.
Like I would take those 4 and say that's a tier. Okay.
For sure.
I mean, look, last year, I think, and the year before, I was like, look, JJ and Chase, Jefferson and Chase are kind of on their own island.
Yeah, 1A, 1B.
Yeah. And then we can talk about, the next tier. And then I think I would say the next tier included 5, 6, 7 guys. And then I had Terry in the next tier, like sort of tier 3.
Sure.
If my tier 1 now is Jefferson, Chase, Nakua, and JSN, my tier 2 would start with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's borderline uncheckable. In the same way that JSN, playing almost similarly in terms of where they line up formationally. I mean, there's not a lot of difference. JSN just seems to get a little bit more separation. That could also be scheme. Who knows? Amon-Ra's there. So where would I have London? Lamb's in that next tier. I can't put Pickens in that next tier. He's just too much of a wingnut. I don't trust him. I'd still put Evans when he's healthy in that next tier. I would. He's still great when he's going to be a problem in San Francisco with Kittle on the field when Kittle gets back. Whenever that is. I don't know if Kittle's going to be ready for the beginning of the season, but with McCaffrey and Kittle and Evans and what they have, he's going to thrive even more. A.J. Brown, talent-wise, certainly is in that next tier. London's in that next tier. Nico Collins is in that next tier for me. And then maybe we get to the third tier again, where guys like Higgins and Terry and Devontae Adams at this point, because he's older. Although, Jesus, I didn't even mention Garrett Wilson. He's probably in tier 2 as just a pure wide receiver talent.
He needs somebody throwing to him.
Yes.
That's the problem.
I know. Who am I missing? I'm looking through. This was...
it depends on where you want to put A.J. Brown in that tier list, along with
I mean,
Devontae
A.J.
Smith.
Brown's in tier 2 talent-wise. I'm telling you, this A.J. Brown to New England thing, he was a problem at the end of last year. I think that his performance against the 49ers and a couple of other games, I think he checked out at the end of last year. And to me, I don't care how bad it's gotten for you and how bad it is. You're a professional and you're playing playoff games.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely embarrassing to himself in that playoff loss to San Francisco. Who are we forgetting of the young guys?
Alec Pierce is kind of coming on for the Colts. We'll see if he can kind of build off of these last couple seasons. Jalen Waddle is a Bronco now, which I forgot about. So he'll have Bo Nix throwing to him instead of Tua. So that'll be interesting to watch. But those are kind of like the tier 3 guys, but I think have a lot of opportunity to climb that ladder. I think Pickens as well deserves to be in this conversation. Probably another tier 3 Terry McLaurin tier type guy with the opportunity to kind of advance further.
If I go JJ, Chase, Nakua, JSN, Amon-Ra, that's 5. Lamb, okay, I'll say 6. Brown, Evans, London, I'm up to 9. Collins, I would have in there at 10. Terry's a post-10 group of receivers, and we're not even thinking about the young guys here. Like, who was really good as a rookie, and it surprised me? Tet McMillan. Who's really good as a rookie? Your guy, Igbuka.
That's right.
Luther Burden was good as a rookie. I'm not putting him into that category yet. We have Malik Neighbors would be on this list if he hadn't gotten hurt last year. Let's not forget, there's no chance that right now you would take Terry McLaurin over Malik Neighbors if both players were healthy. Of course not. You'd be an idiot to do so. Now, Malik Neighbors' injury was a very serious injury. We'll see what happens. But, what is Marvin Harrison going to be in year 3, which is going to be interesting. Some of these young guys, we didn't even mention Jameson Williams. I wouldn't take him over Terry right now. He's too inconsistent.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
Jamo's
take
more of
Christian Watson over Terry. No.
correct.
I don't think I'll tell you what, seriously, Pierce, I know that if he had signed here, in free agency, I'd be excited to have him, but I wouldn't consider him to be the one, or he isn't that much better than Pittman, who signed with Pittsburgh, in my opinion. Anyway, man, when you start looking down the list of the young guys, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. McMillan was really good as a rookie. Oh yeah, I forgot Igbuka was good. Oh, Matthew Golden finally played, pretty well in that playoff loss. Luther Burden looks really good as a young player. Is Harrison going to be what everybody thought he was going to be? Malik Neighbors. I mean, of all those guys that I just mentioned in the last two drafts, the guy that's actually done it on the field and looked elite is Malik Neighbors as a rookie. He looked like an elite receiver already. Anyway, Pete, thanks for that. Yeah, I really like Drake London. I was a Drake London fan at USC. I've been a Drake London fan. The one season he had a good quarterback, a quarterback that can deliver the football no matter where you want to put, our 35-year-old friend Kirk Cousins, 36-year-old now. In that one season with Kirk, it was his best season by far. 100 catches, 1,271 yards, 9 touchdowns. He was dominant that year. And they didn't have, they had Kyle Pitts, but he didn't play well. Pitts was a problem, but they did have Bijan in the backfield. That makes a difference. Drake London with Bijan and with Pitts remaining there. Man, the issue there, of course, right, in Atlanta is who will the starting quarterback be? Will Penix Jr. be healthy and ready to go, or will it be Tua Tagovailoa? It's not a great situation. I was a big believer in Penix coming out. Huge believer in Penix coming out. And it's way too early to throw in the towel on him. And those that love J.J. McCarthy, I would tell you the same thing. It's way too early. I was not a McCarthy fan at all. But it's too early. You just don't know. I mean, the thing that J.J. McCarthy has going for him, and now, by the way, Penix and Tua have going for them, is they've got coaches where the schemes are quarterback friendly. Stefanski now in Atlanta, and obviously Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. That'll be that team, though. Oh, did you know? I didn't know this. Did you know that Jahan Dotson signed with Atlanta?
I did not know this. This is news to me.
Olamide Zaccheaus signed with Atlanta as well in the offseason. I'm just looking at their depth chart. They've obviously got Bijan. Here's another surprise. Did you know that Brian Robinson Jr. signed with Atlanta in the offseason?
Now that you mention it, I do remember that because I remember thinking that's very funny that they're both in the same backfield now.
Who? Oh, Robinson.
Yeah,
Brian
Bijan
Robinson
and Brian.
Bijan Robinson?
Yeah. Just B. Robinson. B-Robs.
Yeah. 3 former Skins are in Atlanta. Jahan Dotson, they don't have an obvious number 2. I'm looking at their oh, you know what? They drafted Zachariah Branch. God, I loved him out of Georgia. We'll see if he ends up being what I think he can be. But right now, you look at Atlanta, and Jahan is wide receiver 2. Scott Turner, that's another thing he always says when I have him on. He says, I'm still a believer in Jahan Dotson. He goes, I think if he gets in the right scheme, in the right, situation, he's going to be a good player. Look, his rookie year with Scott in 2022 and 2023, he was productive. He had 11 touchdown catches in his first 2 seasons in Washington. Much more productive in 22 than in 23 he had 49 catches for 518 yards. Yeah, it's hard to write all these guys off. Always hard to write them off. Major upset in sports this morning. That's next. Major upset at the French Open. I know all of you were waiting for this big news, but Sabalenka, the number one player in the world on the women's side, she was up 6-3, 4-1 and serving, and 2 points away from what would be an easy quarterfinal win into the semifinals. And Diana Schneider, Russian, never heard of her, roared back to win literally 12 of the next 13 games to beat Sabalenka 3-6, 7-5, 6-love. Tennis has been pretty good, I think, at the French Open, but Sabalenka is like the last big name available. No Americans left after Tiafoe lost. I talked about that match yesterday on the show. That was scintillating. And several of you sent me notes about how you had watched it too. Tommy and I talked about it yesterday on my podcast, and Tommy just said, and it's true, like there is just something that is just so different about one-on-one sports. You know, boxing, you get this drama on long, drawn-out events. The 5-hour, 26-minute match the other night between Tiafoe and Arnaldi, the Italian, was the second longest match in French Open history. And there's just this will, this survival sort of thing that kicks in that's just fascinating and very thrilling to watch in sports. It is the thrill of victory, agony of defeat kind of a situation. But, man, it is the test of all. I mean, we've seen it in boxing so many times. I think the ultimate of, essentially, I think, Ali said it was the closest thing to death when he survived in Manila in Frazier Ali 3, that neither one of them looked like they could survive what they had put each other through the first 14 rounds before Eddie Futch, the famous Joe Frazier corner man, threw in the towel because Frazier was essentially blind at that point. One of the all-time great long one-on-one struggles in sports history is the Thrilla in Manila. If you've never watched that fight, I'd urge all of you to just spend an hour one night on a deep dive on YouTube to watch what those two men went through to try to win the fight, the championship of each other, as it was described by, I forget which, columnist / reporter at the time, but he said they were fighting for, yes, the heavyweight championship of the world, but really it was the championship of each other. And the match with Tiafoe the other night was incredible. So Sabalenka, she is out at the French Open, keeping you up to date. No other show's doing it. I would guess that no other show is keeping you up to date on French Open results. That's an event I've never been to. I've been to Wimbledon. I went to Wimbledon once. I really enjoyed it. It was special. The French Open's never really been on the list, although it probably should be. But I'm just not into tennis as much as I used to be. Sean McVay and Myles Garrett both spoke yesterday about the big trade. But the big question now in Los Angeles is there another major all-time great that will fall in line and sign with the Rams as well? More on that next. Yesterday out in Los Angeles, the Rams held their press conference to introduce Myles Garrett to the LA media. Sean McVay was there. Sean McVay said that the hardest part of this deal was saying goodbye to Jared Verse. I think everybody in Los Angeles, I think everybody around the league understands how special Jared Verse might end up being as a pass rusher. This from LADC 99, Kevin, Rams fan living in PG County. I think my team gave up way too much. There isn't that much of a difference between Garrett and Verse. Am I nuts? Question mark. I said this yesterday on the show. Like, I think the Browns got a good deal. I mean, they got the biggest haul, I think, in the history of the league, certainly in modern times for a defensive player. And part of that haul was bringing back a player that looks like he has, perennial, every year, upper level, all pro, Pro Bowl, pass rushing, run stopping potential in Verse, who is 24 years old versus Garrett at 31. Is that what Garrett is now? Is Garrett 31? 30. He's 30 years old. He'll turn 31 at the end of December. By the way, at that position, Myles Garrett is still in his prime. Okay? You don't start at that position to come out of your prime until probably another year or two. And that monster may never come out of his prime. But I understand where you're coming from, LADC 99. Like, part of me wonder, and I'm the biggest Myles Garrett fan. Part of me wonders, like, how much better will they be with Myles Garrett? They're going to be better. I mean, the odds makers believe they'll be better. They went from plus 800, plus 850, somewhere in that range, to plus 600 to win the Super Bowl. I said to Max during the break, I'm like, you can typically only say this about the teams with the elite quarterbacks, and the Rams are one of them. But I don't know if I've ever felt more strongly about, I guess you can say that about the Chiefs in recent years, what I'm going to say about the Rams. But, like, if Matt Stafford is healthy, it's almost impossible to think of the Rams winning any less than 10 games next year. 10 to 15 is a big jump and a big difference typically. But I could not see a team with Matt Stafford at the helm with what he has around him winning any less than 10 games. But to your point, like Jared Verse, who knows, year 3 may have been the year that he turned into an absolute monster. He was already sort of ascending in that, general area. But I think next year for sure, and probably the year after, you're getting more with Garrett than you would with Verse. You're paying for it too, not only in compensation for the trade, but in salary. But I understand that's a lot to give up. But if I'm a Rams fan at this point, I don't care about what I'm giving up. I trust Snead. I trust McVay. As long as we've had a quarterback healthy, we've been in it pretty much every year. So the other piece of news that has been created around the Garrett trade is the idea that Aaron Donald may come out of retirement to join Myles Garrett on the Rams defensive front. Apparently, Pat McAfee yesterday texted Aaron Donald during his show about the possibility of coming out of retirement. And Aaron Donald's reply was, quote, "It's for sure got me thinking," closed quote. This was Sean McVay talking about a potential Aaron Donald return.
There's no, here's what I would say. You talk to Aaron and you see what he's saying about that. But here's what I would tell you guys overall too is, Aaron's a guy that I stay really close in touch with, and I know the respect that he has for Myles. Talk to him about the opportunity to be able to bring him on board. If Aaron decides he wants to dust him off at the age of 35, I bet you he could still do it at a pretty high clip. But here's what I would tell you guys too. The one thing that's great about Myles, we're not going to ask him to do anything other than be himself.
So Aaron Donald, by the way, if you're wondering, is, as he said, 35 years old, and he is 2 years, but it'll be 3 when the season starts. He didn't play in 24, play in 25, so he missed 2 full seasons. So it will be 3 years since his last season in 2023 when he was 32 years old, and he retired after truly one of the most incredible 10-year careers we've ever seen in the NFL. I mean, Aaron Donald is an all-time great. I think all of you understand that. I mean, he was in the league 10 years and made the Pro Bowl 10 times. He was in the league 10 years and made all-pro first team 8 times. Didn't make it as a rookie. He was the defensive rookie of the year. And then in the other season, he didn't make it. It was his one injury season in which he only played in 11 games out of 17. I mean, that's ridiculous. You know, he also, as I'm sure you know, is a 3-time defensive player of the year. I mean, this is the easiest open shut first ballot Hall of Fame case that exists right now, along with Brady, obviously. Brady would be one. I thought Belichick would be one, or 1A. But Aaron Donald, man, what a career. What's interesting about just the possibility of him returning is, you know, you do set the clock back on the Hall of Fame stuff. I don't know if they care about that. But I think on the show yesterday talked about, you know, the Russell Wilson Hall of Fame case. And I said, you know, his Hall of Fame case is absolutely open shut if you just look at the Seattle years. If he retires at the age of 33 years old after his 10-year career in Seattle, he's in the Hall of Fame, no questions asked, probably first ballot, because his 10 years in Seattle included 9 Pro Bowls. And by the way, none of them were anything other than deserved. Russell Wilson, by the way, is 9th all-time in fourth quarter comebacks, 9th all-time in game-winning drives. You know, most of those happening in Seattle, but the year in Denver, that year in 2023 in Denver, he had 4 game-winning drives, 4 fourth-quarter comebacks. He led the league in 2023 in Denver in fourth-quarter comebacks. Who knew? I do remember a comeback against Buffalo on the road on a Monday night game he was good. Russell Wilson's, you know, last 4 seasons, the 2 in Denver, the 1 in Pittsburgh, in which, by the way, he was named a Pro Bowler. I didn't remember that. I mean, he didn't play every game. I think the last game he played in 2024 may have been against us, the game that they won in Landover, and then played last year in New York. You can give back a Hall of Fame induction by playing poorly at the end of your career. I'm sure it all counts. You know, you don't say, oh, we're only going to count the first 10 years. We're not going to count 4 of his 14 seasons. Why would we do that? Because his first 10 were so great. Well, they count. They count. And he was a Hall of Famer lock first 10 years in Seattle, and he's been anything but that in his last 4 years. I think Russell Wilson is a Hall of Famer. I do. And I'm not the biggest Russell Wilson fan when it comes to the kind of guy that he's been. Look, I can only tell you what I've read, and you guys have read, just the diva. I mean, Sean Payton couldn't stand him. I mean, could not wait to get rid of him. When he got traded from Seattle, and remember, Washington had a really good offer to Seattle, but they ultimately picked an AFC team to ship him to. He could have been coming here, and I was in favor of it because we had no quarterback. I know some of you thought we had a quarterback in, you know, Mr. Heineke, but I was all for, you know, taking big swings and just getting a quarterback that you at least had a chance with. But he was on the trade block in 2016 after his first 4 seasons in Seattle. He's on the trade block because they couldn't stand to have him in the building. That story when he got traded to Denver about the 2016 season trying to make a deal for Cleveland's number 1 overall. That was fascinating. Who knew? Nobody really knew outside of that organization that he was the diva that he was. But that aside, Russell Wilson on the football field was, I think, Hall of Fame, quality. I mean, he comes in 2012. Remember, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, that Mike Shanahan, told us, back in 2014, 2015, that Russell Wilson was his favorite quarterback in that draft after Andrew Luck. And look, he liked Robert. That's a miss. That people miss on that sometimes when they say that it was just Snyder and Bruce who wanted RG3. That's not true. Mike was pretty infatuated with RG3's talent as well. He just knew the challenges with RG3 versus other quarterbacks, like a Luck or like a Cousins, who he did like a lot, and they picked him in the 4th round. But Russell Wilson would have been the pick had he been on the board in the 4th round before Cousins. He loved Russell Wilson, loved him. RG3, I've told this story many times. Mike told it on the air, many years ago, that his big concerns were, one, he wasn't ready to play football in the NFL the traditional way. They were going to have to come up with a new way to get him on the field because he was so unpolished and so inexperienced of playing, and a quarterback from the pocket. It's not what he could do. So obviously they created something for him. And the other concern he had was, and I've told this story many times because Mike told it on the air, is that sitting down with him and his father watching film pre-draft 2012, there was one bad game that RG3 had the year before, and he said he and his father literally threw Art Briles, the head coach at Baylor, under the bus over and over again for play calling on the bad plays that Robert had. He took no accountability. He said that was a concern, and he shared those concerns with Dan and with Bruce. But he said, I was on board, and we picked him, and we had a pretty good year in 2012 figuring it out with him. Of course, it all went south after that, and some of his, overall personality concerns may have certainly played into what happened after that. But anyway, I digress. Aaron Donald, if he comes back, what if he played another 2 or 3 or 4 years and he wasn't good? Would that tarnish the career he's had? I don't think guys like that think of it. And apparently he stays in incredible shape, like super, super, ready to play shape. There's a football ready and a normal ready. But can you imagine if Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett, and it is the Aaron Donald that we know and that we remember, along with, by the way, don't forget, they still have that kid from Florida State who's super young, their 2nd-round pick, Braden Fisk. He looks like a great player in the making. They've got Byron Young. The nose tackle they have there, Poona Ford, just sold his jersey number to Myles Garrett. He wore number 95. Garrett's immediately paid for his jersey number. But man, if you had the 2 best defensive players of the last, 15 years, 10 to 12 years on the Los Angeles Rams defense next year, that'd be must watch, man. If Aaron Donald ends up being Aaron Donald and comes back, it feels like he might be. Don't you think, Max? Like there's too much smoke here. It seems like there's a chance he's coming back.
It's far too much smoke, and all like Jeremy Fowler, McVay. I've heard a bunch of people be like, I've reached out to Aaron Donald, and all he has said is, I just have to find that fire, and maybe I'll be back. The fire is playing in a one last ride type scenario with an offense that has Puka Nacua, Matt Stafford, and Devontae Adams on it, while lining up directly next to Myles Garrett as the best defensive player of your generation. I would bet my life that Aaron Donald will be suiting up in a Rams uniform next year.
I'm trying to think if like we've ever had a combination, like literally the 2 best defensive players. I think most of you would agree with that. I mean, there have been other really, really good defensive players over the last 15 years, but none of them have come close to Aaron Donald as an interior defensive lineman. And in my opinion, there have been some great ones, don't get me wrong. Like I am a huge TJ Watt fan. There are great players that have played. Nobody's been as dominating as Myles Garrett. Have we ever had a situation in league history where the two greatest players of a generation on defense have played together? If you've got an answer for me, I'm just trying to think. If you go back to like the 70s, I mean, you did have Eller and Page playing together, in Minnesota. Obviously, if you want to go back to the Rams, the Deacon Jones, the fearsome foursome, I don't know if that you would call, two of those players the two best of a generation.
Like Ray Lewis and Ed Reed.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
I think that's kind of the only one that comes to my mind that would be like that generation. I guess you could throw Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey in there when Jalen Ramsey was like at the top of his game for the Rams. But those are really like the big ones that are really hitting my brain.
No, I think that you just hit it on the head. I mean, you could go with like a Mean Joe Green, Lambert Ham situation from the Steelers. Reggie White in Philadelphia with Jerome Brown. I mean, but they weren't the generational teammates. In Green Bay, he didn't have a generational teammate. Bruce Smith didn't have a generational teammate. Did Butkus on defense? Did LT on defense? LT didn't have a generational teammate on defense. I mean, Harry Carson wasn't that. Yeah, I think you just nailed it. I think you got it. I think Ray Lewis, Ed Reed.
Yeah, that's it. That's
because they were both considered the best safety and the best linebacker of their era. Think more about it. Tweet me if you've got an answer that I'm missing off the top of my head at Kevin Sheehan DC. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. I love you guys when you do this. So many suggestions here on the greatest defensive duos, two of the greatest players together on one team in NFL history, which is what may be possible in Los Angeles if Aaron Donald returns and joins Myles Garrett on defense. But there's no doubt that Max got the one that is comparable, and that would be Ray Lewis, Ed Reed on the same defense for the Ravens. I mentioned Page and Eller and Mean Joe Green and either Lambert or Ham. Several of you mentioned that, but this from Earl. Earl writes, Kevin, you got the two best of the 70s, but you missed the two others from that era that are right there. Randy White, Too Tall Jones, and Deacon Jones, Merlin Olsen. Okay, Jones Olsen is part of the Fearsome Foursome. That's a 60s thing, not a 70s thing. That's before my time. It doesn't mean that it's not the right answer. I get it, though. I know how dominant Deacon Jones was. I mean, Deacon Jones, for people of a certain age, they will say that Deacon Jones was, Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor and, Myles Garrett before any of these guys were. And the sack stat wasn't something that was kept back then. And Merlin Olsen was, a Hall of Famer as well, and they played together on the same defensive line. Page, Alan Page was an NFL MVP. I believe I have this right, that LT, Lawrence Taylor, and Alan Page are the only two defensive players to ever be named NFL MVP. Look that up for me, Max. I'm pretty sure that's true. Going back to the first year where Jim Brown, I think, was the first named NFL MVP. But I think Alan Page and Lawrence Taylor are the only two that were ever defensive MVPs. But a lot of you have come in with a lot of them. Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware from Timmy. DeMarcus Ware is not a generational player. So I would not count that. Several of you have already put in Manley and Mann. It was a good combo, no doubt. But if you were going to go two Redskins from the glory years together, Manley, Darrell Green is, now Manley's not a generational player, though. He was, for a 5-year period, no one was better, but obviously he had a lot of issues that shortened up his career, et cetera. Darrell Green, obviously a Hall of Famer. From Lynn, Sapp Brooks. Yeah, that was good. I don't know if Warren Sapp or Derek Brooks were the best players at their positions during that time. Sapp was close. Sheehan, this from Reggie. Sheehan, Lawrence Taylor could get matched with either Leonard Marshall or Harry Carson. That was the best tandem of the LT era. Yeah, but Leonard Marshall and Harry Carson aren't considered generational players. LT for me, LT is the greatest player of my football watching lifetime, offense or defense, period. I have not yet, as of the 2025 completed NFL season, I've never seen a player as good as Lawrence Taylor on either side of the football. For me, LT's number one. I don't consider Leonard Marshall or Harry Carson, as great as those defenses were. Neither one of those players is generational. Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, that from Mark. Yeah, those Eagles teams with White and Simmons and Jerome Brown and what's his face, right? The guy, Mike and Mike. Mike Greenberg. Again, Golick was a part of that defensive front. Yeah, but I don't consider Jerome Brown obviously died far too early. It's so sad, tragic. He was great and talented. But Reggie White and LT with any player that they played with would not equal Myles Garrett and Aaron Donald together on the same defensive line. Aaron Donald is the best defensive tackle of an era of the 10 years that he played, and he's one of the greatest of all time. And Myles Garrett is certainly the best overall D end of his era, And he'll be considered one of the greatest of all time. Maybe not, in the upper echelon of the greatest of all time, but not that far from it. Kevin Green, Greg Lloyd, nah. Gastineau, Klecko. It was certainly a loud and very charismatic duo. And Gastineau was, for a brief period, dominant for sure. Oh, this is a good one. Although this from Chris. Chris writes, Sheehan, Lester Hayes, Michael Haynes. That certainly is up there among the all-time great cornerback tandems. No doubt. Yeah. I mean, in terms of cornerback tandems, you had the Cleveland tandem of Minifield and what's his face in Cleveland. Hayes, I think Michael Haynes is certainly one of the greatest corners I've ever watched. I think he's probably number one for me in terms of the corners. I mean, Michael Haynes was just truly a lockdown corner when, by the way, you could use both hands and at any point, pretty much in a receiver's route to slow him down. Hayes was one of those big play kind of a guys. Yeah, these are good ones. Yeah. The Randy White, Too Tall Jones. I mean, Randy White was the Aaron Donald of his era. I mean, I think that's probably a really good comp. Randy White in the 70s and 80s Randy White came out of Maryland. He's a Maryland guy. Yes, one of the greatest defensive tackles, Hall of Famer Randy White went to the University of Maryland, played for Jerry Claiborne in the 70s, and was an absolute dominant college football player, won the Outland Trophy, the whole thing, got drafted by the Cowboys, and ended up being one of the all-time great defensive tackles in NFL history and a Hall of Famer. And their styles are similar, actually. Aaron Donald, Randy White was unblockable, unless Russ Grimm was blocking him in an NFC championship game. What else have you guys sent? Singletary and Dent, or Wilbur Marshall in Singletary. How about Darrell Green, Champ Bailey, and Dion all on the same team? And that was, of course, the Washington team of 2000. Yeah, I mean, Champ was obviously very young at that point. Fred Smoot was on that team, right? No, Smoot was my fault. Smoot got picked the next year and played with Champ and Darrell Green. Dion was gone. Or Dion was there briefly, right? In the Marty year. Yeah. But look, all three of those players are generational kind of players, but they weren't all playing at the same time in their prime when they were here in Washington. Love this. Yeah, it's if Aaron Donald teams up with Myles Garrett, you've got to consider it to be one of the best combinations in NFL history. Of course, we don't know what Aaron Donald will be when he comes out for this. If he does, will he be the same Aaron Donald? It will have been 2 full seasons out, 3 years since he last played football. So we'll see. So Gil sent this to me, and I appreciate this because this is something that change the subject, by the way. Warren Sharp, I love Warren Sharp's football analysis, put a tweet out yesterday. Gil sent it to me. The highest percentage of receiver error causing incompletions in 2025. So the highest percentage of wide receiver error causing incompletions, and he ranked it by team. So the highest percentage of receiver error last year that caused incompletions, Jacksonville had that situation. So Trevor Lawrence had a group of receivers that were either dropping passes slipping, losing the ball as they go to the ground, not getting both feet in when they should have gotten both feet in. And this is Warren Sharp. It's a percentage of attempts that were incomplete due to receiver errors, such as receiver drops, lost control at the ground, didn't get both feet in bounds, but should have, fell down, and a couple of other smaller instances. It does not necessarily, according to Warren Sharp, include bad routes, which we were told about the Seattle game on Sunday Night Football, that literally the receivers that Washington had out on the field were not running the correct routes. It was Chris Moore and Robbie Chosen, and Treylon Burks had just been there for about 3 hours, and they put him out there, and it was a disastrous night, and they got manhandled up front. That was really a bad night. But back to the rankings. So Jacksonville had the most wide receiver error that caused incompletions. Denver was second, Cleveland third, the Giants fourth, and Washington was fifth. So Washington had the fifth highest percentage of receiver error that caused incompletions. And of course, they just didn't have many of their better wide receivers playing. Terry only played in, 10 games or 11 games or whatever it was. Debo missed some games. Terry played 10 games. You had a rookie out there in Jalen Lane. You had, Chris Moore and Treylon Burks and Robbie Chosen and Tay Martin. Remember that? Jacoby Jones. These are the guys that they had running routes. So that's where they ended up, fifth on that list. By the way, if you want to look at something next year, like if Warren Sharp is keeping a running, percentage of wide receiver error that causes incompletions, it may be an important statistic, but because the fewest wide receiver errors in the league that cause completions, the New England Patriots, and the second fewest, the Seattle Seahawks. The two teams that played in the Super Bowl had the fewest percentage of receiver errors that caused incompletions in the league, according to Warren Sharp. One of the things that DVOA measures is, a stat that they call wide open rates. And New England was consistently all season long near the top of the list of receivers who were wide open. It was one of the things that I pointed out about Drake May's season. And again, this is not a knock against Drake May, because I actually really believe he looks the part. I thought he looked the part despite, literally having an abysmal postseason. In his second season as an NFL quarterback, Drake May looked the part. 6'4", 230. Can make every throw, plays on time, and obviously is very good as a play extender. But that Patriot team last year had receivers who were just flat out getting open. Diggs, Butte, Hollins, Douglas. Who am I forgetting? Next year, obviously, it'll be A.J. Brown. And that is a Josh McDaniels hallmark. He gets people open. It doesn't matter who's playing receiver in New England. He gets and schemes people open. Josh McDaniels does. Always has during the course of his career. Always has. Even as a head coach in Denver, he was able to do that. So I think that that's something that you have to consider about the Patriots coming up this year, is that it's as much about the OC as it is maybe about the receivers. And A.J. Brown's got a pretty good get open rate as well. That team still, to me, looks good. Their schedule on paper looks brutal early, but I don't see why the Patriots shouldn't be a good football team again, and they should be coming off the way they finished the season defensively. They drafted the tackle in the first round. They just have to improve their offensive line, I think. And I would imagine that what's his face, the LSU tackle, Will Campbell, the first-round pick from the year before, who struggled at times. Year two, maybe a little bit better. But A.J. Brown, Romeo Dobbs, the two additions. Butte's back. Kyle Williams, the kid from Washington State, who I loved, really started to come on at the end of the year. Demario Douglas had an incredible wide open rate. That DVOA measurement, reflecting how open they were. And then you got Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson in the backfield. That team should still be good. I mean, you can't focus on schedules, man. Focus on the teams. They stay healthy. They should be a good team. They're well coached. Even with all the Vrabel stuff with Diana. I mean, he's a football coach, and he's a good one. They should be a good football team. All right, something that was said about Wemby's emotional breakdown after the Game 7 win. Next, Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. Don't forget you can watch this show on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Just please, when you get there, hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. That really helps us out. All right, what do I got? I got a congratulations to one Mello Trimble. Mello Trimble, who played for Maryland all the way back in the mid-2010s, 2014 through 2017, a hell of a college basketball player in College Park. Played for old Joe Wooten at Bishop O'Connell way back in the day, a DM Veer. Mello Trimble, where's he been? He's been in Russia, playing in Russia's top league, the VTB League. And yesterday, he was named the MVP of that league at 31 years old. He averaged 18.3 points per game, 4.1 assists, shot 48.4% from the field, close to 39% from three-point range. And he was presented with the MVP trophy by Alex Ovechkin. Alex Ovechkin presented Mello Trimble with his MVP trophy in Russia yesterday. I don't know if that was in Moscow. I have no idea. If you're wondering about Mello Trimble's career since college, he never did play in an NBA game. He was, on some of those lower tier leagues in Europe. He's played all over Europe, played in China for a few years, played in Spain, played in Australia. Looks like he played, I don't know, is that Brazil? But has played the last 3 seasons in for CSKA Moscow in the top Russia league, and he is the MVP. He's had a very successful international career. He's a 2-time champion. He's now a 2-time he's been a 2-time playoff MVP, and now he is a first-time MVP of the league. Congrats to Mello Trimble. I loved watching Mello Trimble play, and he really, some big games that he had for Maryland for sure. Big buzzer-beating shot at Wisconsin. I'll never forget that one. The buzzer-beating shot he had in his final game at home against Michigan State to beat the Spartans, and some interesting tournament games as well during the Mello Trimble reign. All right, so yesterday on the show, in talking about and in catching up on some of the things that I'd missed when I was on vacation, I talked about Game 7 a lot. I talked about the Spurs-Thunder series a lot. I talked about Game 7, and I said that, Wembanyama, unlike SGA, Wembanyama got a lot of support. That's why San Antonio's moving on. SGA didn't get any support. During that series, he just didn't get enough. And certainly, arguably their second best player didn't play in the series, and that hurt him. I don't know if it would have made a difference. I think it would have, but it's part of the game. And, a team that everybody has described, including yours truly, as the deepest in the NBA, should have been able to overcome it. And they didn't, because San Antonio just flat out was better, and they deserved to win. But in my observations of the series end of Game 7, I pointed out that I thought it was pretty wild that Victor Wembanyama was so emotional at the end of that game on Saturday night. He was weeping uncontrollably, just drained physically, mentally, but just so emotional. I'm not sure I knew this, but there have been a lot of conversations during these first few years of the Wemby experience about what an emotional player he is. And I have seen on the floor how emotional he can get. Not in terms of berating referees or complaining. He doesn't have that issue. He's not a serial complainer like Luka Doncic, as an example, or LeBron. He's not that kind of guy. He's just very emotional. He lets his emotions get to him. He got tossed from a game in the Minnesota series, had a couple of flagrants, throughout the playoffs. Look, he's 7'5", and the other team's sole focus is to physically try to beat the hell out of him, because at 7'5", he is still not physically mature compared to where he'll probably be in 2 or 3 years at 25, 26 years old versus 22 years old. I have to say that during the postseason, and I made this observation multiple times, I don't think I've ever seen a player fall down more or get knocked down to the ground more than he does. But, big tree fall hard. And he did a lot of times. And he would look, very dramatically, the response would be, and, he'd look hurt, like he's done. No, he never was. He's tough. He is competitive, what, as Javon Kinlaw would say. Anyway, I said that I would just observationally, yesterday, why the tears? Why it felt to me like I was watching a guy that had just won the title after years and years and years of being denied it. The Jordan finally winning it and clutching the Lawrence O'Brien trophy in the locker room. Like there was a massive weight lifted off his shoulders. And it's not really what Wemby, this is his first playoffs. And it looked like it was a culmination of something, and it wasn't. My point yesterday was, man, you got to get it together. You got 4 more games you got to win before you get sized up for a ring. Like Saturday night was not the championship. You're about to play in the championship. And a couple of you said, man, lighten up on Wemby. I mean, the guy was phenomenal. Of course he is. Nobody's ever said anything but that. I love watching this guy. It was an observation. Well, Kevin Garnett on his podcast went off yesterday on Wemby's reaction, the uncontrollable emotion after winning Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. This was Garnett yesterday talking about the same subject.
He's crying in Western Conference Finals. That was too emotional for that to be. That was too emotional for me.
Oh, what?
Yeah, man. He got 4 more games to try to get. You got to go to the finals now. Nah, you still got to be even killed right here. And that trophy, that ain't what that's cool. Yeah, we beat them, cool. But I got a whole nother sight in this up here. It's going to take my energy to run up this hill. I can't be you. Nah, that's how bad they wanted to beat OKC. You know what I'm saying? But, man, this right here, nah. And then to me, this is the Knicks. Only window I see. They got to get it right now. I'm talking about, you got no Boston on here, you got no OKC, you got to go now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I felt. Like I felt like I was watching a guy that just won the championship and felt like, all of the weight that's been mounting on his shoulders of all these years of not getting it done, finally he can take a breath and say, I'm a champion. And just none of that was true. It was his first time in the playoffs. Yes, they got through a team that was the defending champion, but it's the first time they've ever played this team in the postseason. And I just thought it was interesting. He's very emotional. And the one point I would make is when you go through a series like the one he just went through, and that series was just, start to finish, intense and physical. And so much of it from the opposition, Oklahoma City, was directed towards him that I'm sure physically he was like, oh, my God. I mean, I don't have a problem with him being an emotional player. I just observed the same thing apparently that Kevin Garnett did, which is it's not over yet. And it seemed like he felt like the weight of the world has just been lifted from my shoulders. I'm a champion. And that's not what happened. And I don't know why he would feel that much other than just having gone through an incredible physically and emotionally draining 7-game series. I get that part. I do. But he's got to get it together, man. He's got to get it together. And they got game 1 tonight, and they got an opponent that hasn't lost a game in 41 days in the New York Knicks. We'll have picks on the NBA Finals later on in the show and give you a chance if you want to weigh in with an NBA Finals prediction along with maybe, a headline that you think we'll see from the NBA Finals. We'll do that later on in the show. Ben Standig will join us next. Been a while since we've talked to Ben because I was away. I don't know if Ben joined the show while I was away, but he's back today, and it's a day after one of the OTA days that was open to media yesterday after last week's OTA days. He's got some stuff on Terry McLaurin, but I wanted to start with this. You had mentioned to me in a text that you had an opportunity to sit down with team president Mark Klaus. I would assume people will be able to read that on your Substack or listen to it on your podcast at Ben Standig to get access to all of it. But what did Klaus have to say about anything? Was there anything there that was interesting that you can share with us?
Yeah, he was out there at the park yesterday because the team was announcing that they were going to have some value price menus for their food out at the stadium. A lot of things under $5 and $10. A lot of your staples, your chicken tenders, your sodas, things like that, which is good deal. But anyway, so that was like why he was there. So we didn't talk about that for a little bit. But I think for me, I'm always intrigued by the idea of they've got this one big mission item of building a new stadium, but that still isn't going to happen for another few years.
Right.
And how do the people who were tasked with having to maintain this other thing that nobody really wants anymore, how do you sort of go about that? Because you can't just do it, I think you got to do it with some sincerity that you really are into it. And he just said,
you got 4 more seasons to play there. 4.
Yeah. So how do you maintain that enthusiasm to a degree, knowing that everybody wants to go to this other thing? And he's like, hey, look, I mean, we recognize fan engagement was down. He came in after Harris bought the team, and that's just a big focus of everything that they're doing. And I would say, as somebody who's a non-fan, and I'm not in that season ticket space, like I do kind of buy that they are trying whatever they can to make this work. I mean, they want to get the season ticket holders up for the obvious reasons for now, but also for those people will then hopefully buy tickets for the next place. The next place, it's still, is in the very early stages. They're working on things like plumbing, and things like that.
When will they officially break ground? Do you know when that happens?
Next year, I'm not exactly sure. I want to say it's sort of the first half of the year, but I don't know if we have an exact month or anything like that at this point. But the first half of of the year, and I mean, all the it sounds like everything is going as hoped for now, and I think also we now accept the fact that this is going to happen, but it is still kind of wild that after all the machinations that went on. That it is in fact going to happen. Maybe for a lot of us, it's sort of like, okay, when I see a couple of things, a couple shovels in the ground, then I'll believe. But obviously, yeah, it sounds like it's going in a good direction, and they're hopeful. Also, I mean, along with the food items, which are first season ticket holders, there's other things like if you get season tickets now, you can go out to 6 training camp practices instead of 3. Sounds like a good deal as long as you don't take my parking. I think it was just in general, like I said, it was just a positive, upbeat conversation because that's the business that he's in right now. And I'm not good about people just thrusting agendas on me if I don't buy it. But in this case, like I said, I think everything they've done to me has seemed pretty reasonable in terms of what they're attempting to accomplish, but it's also trying to have that fan base is engaged as much as possible.
Do you have any clue as to, I mean, I know that they are not sold out season ticket wise. I know that because I continue to get push, emails and even calls about season tickets. But do we know how many season ticket holders there are?
I don't really have a number. I believe he said to me that about 80% of their sales come from season tickets. So okay. I guess
so, like 40,000 season ticket holders, roughly 45,000, something like that.
Sounds about right. Because he was also saying, of course, that if you're not, while a lot of the
no, they're 60,000 capacity, right? What's their capacity? 62,000 now. It's one of the lowest in the league, right?
Yeah, around there. Yeah, I mean,
so about
the
48,000 season tickets. That actually is more than I thought that they had. So if they're at 80%, that's good. That's pretty good. I mean, it's not sold out like a lot of NFL teams are, but considering what they've gone through in so many different aspects, it sounds like it's significantly increased from where it was 3 years ago.
Yeah, and like I said, that's the take I have. I mean, like you said, we could probably poke at some numbers and say, oh, it's like a rebuilding team. You can see the rebuild happening, even if the record is still not where you want it to be. And it feels like that's the case here. That it's again been mostly positive. Since they've been able to with Klaus and be able to turn the corner in terms of what's the message, what they're selling, and so on. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I think to me it comes across as all pretty positive. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to Mark. I think he does a pretty good job for the role that he has, and so and this is not just like what he says. Like on the record, I've been in meetings where he's been at, and I think he's a pretty good representation for this group. We talk about faces of the franchise. Obviously, that's the quarterback and some others, but for what he needs to do, I think he does a good job for them.
All right. I'm going to read to you my favorite email that I've read since I got back from vacation. I'm pretty sure, and Tommy agrees with me, that this was in jest, trying to get me riled up. But Terry D wrote, Kevin, I know you don't think much of OTAs, but all the talk last week was really positive. Chig, as in Okonkwo, looked sharp. Diami picked up the chemistry with Jaden from where he left it off in the playoff game in Detroit. Terry McLaurin's in early, and it's already paying off. And the best news yet, Styles and Williams are ready to play at a high level right now. I don't think you'll need time to grade this last draft. I hope you've been following along and will weigh in. I think that Terry understands my overall idea of what this time of year produces, which is nothing for us unless there's a big injury or a big trade. And or a big, post, draft addition to the roster, which I think we both think is still a possibility. But I'll ask you, you were there last week and you were there yesterday. Is there anything other than what Terry D believes to be true that you can take out of it and say, okay, well, that's of substance football wise?
Yeah, no, I mean, I sometimes I think I'm just like too honest in like things I say like on my own podcast. And yesterday was kind of like, look, if you're here to get the full breakdown of all the things that happened from like a technical standpoint and this, that, and the other, I don't know what to tell you. Like I'm going to tell you what I saw, but this is about the little things. This is about the vibe. This is not about big sweeping proclamations of who's going to start. And do we have a better sense of David Blau's offense, that he's going to have guys moving around the formation? Terry McLaurin talked about that a bunch yesterday, and we'll have some different looks. Of course, yes. Have we heard players to say that the Durante Jones defense does sound very similar to what Brian Flores was doing in Minnesota, as we assumed, which means guys will be coming from here, there, and everywhere attacking the quarterback? Yes. But okay, beyond that, it's not like you can say, wow, so-and-so looks amazing here or there. Somebody asked me yesterday, what do I think about the fact that Sonny Styles wasn't like always out there with the ones? Is that a big deal? And I was like, I mean, I can't really. I was like, basically get me to like halfway through training camp, and then we can start having that kind of a conversation, possibly. So, yeah, I mean, look, I will just say that, if you can't be positive this time of year, you have real problems.
Yeah, right.
And last year, I'm not saying that they weren't positive, but, the Terry McLaurin situation just hung over the whole deal. And, it was impossible to ignore. If we're talking to Jaden, what's it like to not have Terry here? We're talking to Quinn. What's the deal with that? Peters, et cetera. So, like, the fact that none of that is happening, not just with Terry, with anybody, is a huge deal. And I do think that you can feel the positive vibes from that. Again, on top of the fact that, they had full participation last week. This week, at least Tunsil wasn't there, but not a big deal. So I do think that is important. And I do believe that there is better vibes than it were a year ago. But, that we'll see what that translates to down the line.
Talking to Ben Standig, of course, our team insider on this show at Ben Standig on X. You can link to his Substack, which I highly encourage you to do. I am a subscriber, and I know many people that are. Your latest story was on Terry McLaurin, and without, divulging everything he told you, I am curious as to what he thought last offseason meant to the season he ended up having, which obviously was the worst of his career, and mostly due to the fact that he didn't play in 7 or 8 games last year. But how much did he think the contract negotiations, the holdout, the lack of participation until very late in training camp and closer to the regular season, how much did he think it impacted his season last year?
Yeah, he was asked about last year a fair amount yesterday, and it's one of those deals where he's like, on the one hand, I'm pushing forward, not worrying about the past. On the other hand, he's like, also, I'm not forgetting it either. You got to take adversity in life and find, why did it happen? What lessons can you take away? And so on. He said he learned a lot about himself, et cetera. But in terms of the specific football aspect, when asked, like, what's one thing you think looking back on it that maybe you didn't appreciate before you stayed away, and he said it was the building of the chemistry with Jaden, building on top of it. Obviously, their first year together was spectacular. And Terry said, look, I was going into my 7th year, but he's only going into his 2nd year. So to not have those reps, to not build upon what we were doing, that didn't really help the cause. He didn't say anything about that the injury came from missing that time. And obviously we all kind of think it, but, you can't say for sure. But he did say that, not being out there with Jaden to build on that was a big deal. And that's why they started this year, even before OTAs, they were out together in California, running routes, doing things. He said Jaden, they were constantly talking. Jaden's always texting him with ideas or thoughts about something they just went through or what have you. So I think that aspect of it seems like a pretty big deal. And again, I will just say that, to his credit, look, he's like, look, he said he also recognized that, football is not just playing the game, it is also the business. And that was a real, slap in the face last year with how that went down. He says he has no regrets, but obviously it took a lot longer than I'm sure anybody thought or wanted to have happen. But he doesn't seem like he's bitter or angry. Even last year when he came back, it didn't seem like he was holding grudges. Like, hey, I did what I had to do. They did what they had to do. Let's move forward. And he really does seem to embrace that. And as a guy who is viewed as a leader, not just Jaden even said last week about the fact that Terry was there. Like, it's not just on the field. It's, he is one of the leaders of this locker room. And this time of year in particular, like, that stuff counts. They have a very unsettled receiver room. You're right. You need somebody there to, follow what he's doing. If he's not, if everything revolves around what is Terry going to do more or less, and they'll figure out the rest. So to have him there on and off the field is a big deal. And it does seem like he is all in on everything that's going on.
Yeah, I made note of that because I went back. I think I told you this the other day. I went back and watched a lot of the pressers that I missed when I was out last week. And you and I, by the way, I think share the same opinion about Jaden's press conference. I found him to be, just more comfortable. And, there was a maturity to him. Not that he was ever immature, and it's not like he's a scintillating interview. I think we all understand that. But there was just sort of like every time I watched Jaden in the first 2 years, it's like I felt like Sean basically said to him, all right, it's just 8 or 9 questions and you'll be done. And he was trying to get through it as quickly as possible. And I didn't feel that way watching it last week. Before I get to what he said about Terry and what you just said, I wanted to emphasize it. You felt the same way, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Going into the first OTA, when I was doing my podcast, I was saying that, what are we watching? What am I looking for? And of course the on-field stuff, but I said with Jaden specifically, I'm actually curious at maybe even more about what he's like at the microphone, because It's not like I'm looking for him to say anything wildly, great quote. That would be fun, but I'm not expecting that. He probably shouldn't in a lot of ways. But how is his what's his presence like? Does he feel like he has more of a voice? Does he feel like he's taking more ownership of everything? Not that he hasn't been, a leader and so on from the start, but yeah, like you said, the way I kept phrasing it was his body language is always kind of like with like his parents telling him in front of their friends, "Hey, stand up and tell them what you did last summer." And he was like, "Okay," and he went through it. He sounds fine.
Yeah,
but he didn't necessarily like want.
And then you can join us at the grown-up table for dinner.
He did it. He was fine, but it's like
Right.
Nothing was a big deal, etc. But this time it felt he had more of a business-like approach in a good way, a little more. Again, he's plenty mature, but more maturity in terms of how he's responding to us and things like that. So I was impressed with what he was saying and doing, and everybody else around him when we've asked about that has said similar things, that they're recognizing that as well. So if that really is coming across, and I think that's a good sign. Ultimately, the quarterback is the one position you can't just be super casual at all times. You do have to be more of a business-like leader, and again, I think he demonstrated that.
Yeah. I don't necessarily care that much. It's just all observational. I care more about what happens on the field, but I do like you sort of notice things that jump out, and that jumped out. And what got me to thinking about it is when you said that when he was talking about the absence of Terry last year, he immediately jumped to it was also about having him in our locker room. It was his leadership, which, I think that's one of those things that it's hard for us to touch as fans in terms of what it really means. But when you hear him and the way we already admit that he seemed to be more engaged than ever before in an interview, and he jumped right to, look, we really missed him in the locker room, last year, not, throughout the offseason, throughout training camp. I thought that was interesting. I mean, what do they mean by that? I mean, we all understand there's certain people you want at work, leaders that you want, in a sales meeting or even, on your bowling team or whatever it is. But what do you think it means with Terry? What kind of leader is Terry really?
You and I are old enough to remember the commercials for E.F. Hutton back in the day. What was the tagline?
When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen.
Yeah, and that's the commercial, like this whole noisy room would quiet down when somebody mentions E.F. Hutton. I kind of feel like that's the way it is with Terry. Like, he's not a guy that's going to go out of his way to make outlandish statements or be the class clown or anything like that. But when he speaks to you, whether it's one-on-one or I think to the group, there is a genuine sincerity to what it is that he is saying, that if he's speaking up, that there's something to that, whoa, okay, if he's bringing stuff. I remember going back to his rookie season, not the rookie season, his first season with Ron Rivera. I think they had just beaten Cleveland on the road, and Terry had a good game, and Rivera was asking after the game, "Hey, rah, we did this, we did that. Anybody else have anything to say?" And he just said, and Terry spoke up. He'd only been in the league for a few games, or I guess a year and a few games. And he was like, "Hey, look, I know I'm a young guy here, but I just want to say that, like, the feeling we have now, don't forget this. You win a game and you think maybe it's going to keep, be there the next week. No, you got to keep believing, you got to keep pushing. And right now, that's what the feeling that we have." He said something along these lines. And just the fact that he was willing to do that, it did not come across to me as somebody who is the definitive halftime speech guy, but it came across as, okay, he really thinks this and he really wants to impart his thoughts because he wants this thing to keep going. So that's how I've kind of always taken what it means for him to be a leader, where, again, other guys, maybe it's, a little more vocal, but I think that's kind of what it is, a combination of lead by example, but when he speaks, he's going to say something that is sincere and intelligent.
Did anybody look different physically? I should have thought about this and asked you even before I had you on the phone, because wasn't it last year at this time that everybody was thinking that Jaden Daniels looked different physically, like he was bigger and stronger? Did anybody look different physically? Everybody was there.
Yeah, it's funny because last year before camp, there was this notion of that Jaden had been working out more, put on some muscle or whatever, and so that became a topic. This time, that was not a part of the conversation that we were really having at the beginning, and because when we spoke with him last week, we had him up on a variety of issues. None of them were about necessarily him getting bigger. I did kind of think, if you look at the videos, that he did to me look a little bit bigger in his arms and maybe in his chest. Again, nobody's comparing him to to Shaquille O'Neal or anything, but I'm just saying for him, it did look like a little bit bigger. Beyond that, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think you got to sort of see them, standing up next to them a little bit more. But they're all huge people, so it's hard. I don't know if anybody necessarily stands out in that regard. But and I haven't heard Quinn or anybody say player X, Y, or Z has dropped 20 pounds or come in looking a certain way. So I don't know about definitively, but at the same point, I haven't seen anything where I'm like, oh boy, this guy, didn't push away from the table too much or, anything along those lines. So I think that's certainly the positive there.
Here's something that you can actually, take away some substance from this time of year, and that is things that aren't, opponent or scheme dependent or pads contingent, and that is kicking. I'm just curious, did Jake Moody or the guy from Iowa, Stevens, did either one of them, have a better few days than the other?
Yeah, this is one of those, again, tricky things. We're out there, so far, at the end of this week, they will have had 6 OTA sessions. We'll have watched 2. So,
okay.
Can only go on the ones that we see. But, look, both of them in the 2 practices, largely made their kicks, their field goal attempts ranging anywhere from 28 yards back into the 50s. And they look fine. What was noticeable, though, is that Stevens' leg strength is definitely bigger. Last week when they were in the bubble, the interior wall of the bubble was 5 yards, 7 yards or so behind the goalpost.
Right.
And when they would kick it, they would hit. It would hit. There was no net, so the ball would hit the bubble. And when Stevens was doing it, there was a noise. There was a real thud. And that stands out because obviously in this era of
did
NFL
the ball
kicking,
go through the goalposts before it made the thud sound?
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah. So by and large, last week Stevens was perfect 6 for 6. Moody was 5 for 6. This week they were an additional period. I think they were both 6 for 8. The misses largely from deep, but not huge deal. They also made kicks from deep. So I'm just saying that's the point. Is from what we can tell right now in this era where kickers are regularly making field goals from 55 plus, 60, without thinking too much.
Right.
That Stevens looks more like that type of dude. Now, again, like you said, you got to keep it between the uprights, and I don't think Moody has done anything to suggest that he can't. But the wonder is he really that guy from 50 plus? That was a question when he got here, and he did make both his tries last year from 50 plus. But what about from 58? What about from 62? If that's going to be a thing that they really want to emphasize, as a lot of teams are, Brandon Aubrey in their own division, then Stevens looks very interesting right now.
How much talk about the center position and what was said, if anything?
Not a ton. We didn't really get to offensive line yesterday much with Quinn or Blau for whatever the reason. But, it's Nick Allegretti, a 6th-round pick, and a veteran of Julian Good-Jones who's played 1 game in his career, and I think he's 29. So until they add out somebody else, I just don't see this idea of a competition. Allegretti is, though, viewed as a guy who's got to be intelligent to play that spot. He is that. I think that, he's pretty broad-based frame. I mean, he looks the part. Whether he is, obviously, we'll have to wait and see. Without any, without pads, without real contact, I don't really even watch the line play too much in practices because there's really nothing to see.
Right.
Maybe it remotely simulates the game. So we'll have to, see where he's at come training camp. But, right now, to my eyes, and I don't know how anybody else would think this, it's, Nick Allegretti, and it's going to be his job unless something goes terribly wrong.
All right. We are, of course, being joined by Ben Standig, who has covered the team for several years. But before that, he covered the Wizards. And we are, a few weeks away from their number one pick overall. You still on DeBonsa as the move they'll make and the pick they'll make?
I mean, I don't, I don't know what they think. Again, it's similar to with the football team. When I see people out there who aren't, Adam Schefter, or in the NBA case, Shams, telling us, well, the Wizards are thinking X, Y, or Z. Give me a break. That's not true. You don't know anything. They're not saying anything. When I'm talking to people, though, or listening to people, in interviews, it gets more confusing. There's a lot. I don't recall the last time that 3 different prospects were being viewed by some people as the clear number one player. I mean, I've heard some people be very enthusiastic about Cameron Boozer. I get it, but to me, from the upside perspective, he's just not the athlete that some of these other guys are. DeBonsa has all the size, all the length that you would want out of a 6'9" forward in this modern age. He scored like a champ last year in college. He's clearly confident if you've listened to any of his interviews, and he's done a lot over the last few weeks. And then you get to the Darren Peterson, who obviously was a huge wild card because of how uneven his season was at Kansas, missed a lot of games. And then I'll have people say to me, well, yeah, that's a big question. It's hard to figure out what to make of that, but he might be Kobe Bryant. I'm like, well, you can't just throw that in there as an aside, like we've got questions, but the upside might be, one of the top, 15 players of all time. Now, obviously, I don't think anybody's suggesting, even like with Wembanyama, he's not at the level of the best centers of all time yet, but we can see where this is going. I wish we saw more of Peterson at the college level to say, okay, I get where people are making those comps. I didn't watch all of his high school games where, he clearly, according to the people who scout these things, was clearly the guy. But that to me is the wild card. What do the Wizards think of Darren Peterson? Because if the upside really is that high, I mean, I don't know how you're just definitely passing on it. But DeBonsa is probably a very, he's got a good ceiling as well, and it feels like a safer pick. And you don't want to blow this, so they really have to do their homework on Peterson. Obviously, everybody does, who might get him at the top 2 or 3 picks. But I would still go DeBonsa right now. But the Peterson part of this to me is very fascinating.
All right, who do you like in the finals, and why?
Well, just to recap, I did pick the Spurs and the Knicks last time, so let's just remember that.
Wait, when was that? At what point was that? Before the conference finals?
Yeah, you asked me here, and I said I got the Spurs.
Okay. I just wanted to give you credit if you actually picked it from the beginning of the playoffs.
Absolutely. I will say, to me, it was purely because not only is Wemby awesome, that he was going to murder Chet, and obviously that's how that played out. Oof. Okay. But
honestly, I said this yesterday. That's one of the most feeble Game 7 performances by a player of note, and he was a third-team All-NBA player this year, that I have ever seen. I don't know that I've ever seen a player be that terrified, that scared, that frightened in a 7th and deciding game. He wanted nothing to do with the basketball, and when he got it, he was fumbling all over it. It was one of the all-time anxiety choke jobs by a player of his stature I think I've ever seen. He shot 2 times. I mean, he did have a third attempt that he got fouled on, but he was 1 for 2. That was the biggest indictment. And he played scared the whole series, but nothing like Game 7. I've never seen anything like it. Have you?
No, it was so bad that even if you want to say to me, hey, OKC won the title the year before, they had the best record this year, they were 1 game away from probably winning another title, why would you break anything up? I would say that series for Chet was so demoralizing, and knowing that Wembanyama and the Spurs are only going to get better, I would absolutely, if I'm OKC, look to use all the thousands of draft pick assets they have to figure out how do I improve on Chet. So I think it was that bad that I don't know how you don't strongly consider it if you're Sam Presti. But as far as this series goes, it's fascinating. If you listen to some people, the Knicks are underrated in the sense that, obviously how they're going to deal with Wembanyama is a big deal. Karl Anthony Towns is probably going to get in foul trouble because they'll make some dumb fouls, and then Mitchell Robinson's hurt. So how are the Knicks going to be able to deal with that? But on the other hand, they have a lot of guys that can score, led by Brunson. They have a lot of dudes who are not going to be afraid the way it felt like maybe some of the Warriors were. On the other hand, boy, it feels like they're massively overrated. On the other hand, it feels like the Knicks are massively overrated. Like the idea that they just dominated the East, but seriously, the East, it was horrendous. They beat the Hawks twice in the end. They murdered a Sixers team that I don't know how they beat the Celtics, but they were awful in the next round. And the Cavaliers are a joke, as we saw in Game 1 where they blew the huge lead, and it was never a series after that. So I don't really think the Knicks are as good as people think. So I got the Spurs. I'll go in 6. I just think, my biggest question with the Spurs would have been, how will the young kids handle the moment? Well, we just saw how they handled the moment last round. So unless the actual being in Madison Square Garden spooks anybody, I'll go Knicks in 6. Spurs in 6.
Yeah, I thought for a while that Oklahoma City wouldn't lose a series 4 out of 7. And I do think that if Jalen Williams was in that series, it may have turned out differently, but he wasn't. And the truth is they won 3 games without him anyway, and they were favored to win Game 7. So they certainly could have gotten there without him regardless. But with the Knicks, what's fascinating is I didn't give the Knicks any chance a week ago to beat San Antonio or Oklahoma City. But I totally agree with you. The Cavaliers are a total joke, and James Harden's one of the all-time playoff jokes for a Hall of Fame player that we've ever seen. But they have not lost a game in 41 days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing the way the playoffs work, and how much time you have off if you sweep somebody. They have not lost in 41 days, and the 11 games that they've won by an average of 23.8 points per game. Like, they have hung these numbers and these margin differences that are just astounding. I mean, they did play NBA teams in the conference semifinals and the conference finals. They've got 2 losses, as you know, both by 1 point to CJ McCollum and Atlanta, because he was the guy that played well in both of the Atlanta wins. And I find it hard, kind of intellectually anyway, to completely discount a team that hasn't lost in the playoffs in 41 days and has blown out everybody. And even that overtime game ended up being a double-digit, win. So I'm giving the Knicks a chance. I'm going to make my pick here, at the end of the show, and I will probably pick San Antonio. But I think the Knicks have a shot. I think that they play differently than they played last year. The ball doesn't stick like it did last year, or like it did early in the Atlanta series, actually. And I think that that's beneficial. If it does stick, if they go back to ISO ball, they have no chance. Not against those guys, not against Castle, guarding Brunson, whoever, ends up guarding him. But should be fun. I had somebody email me saying, when was the last time a finals was this anticipated? Do you feel that way with Wemby against the Knicks? I feel like this is going to be a highly rated NBA finals.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like Wembanyama has reached a point where his name is getting beyond the sports realm, right? That he is like, wait, what's going on here?
Right.
And then,
it's into pop culture right now.
Yeah. And then obviously the Knicks are the Knicks. Any team showing up with the Knicks jerseys, people are going to be extra interested in watching. Obviously, the city of New York will be captured by this whole situation. I think to me, like, if the Knicks are going to win, Towns is going to have to be, at a minimum, a significant offensive threat and not be a dummy when it comes to making.
Has to pull Wemby away from the bucket. Has to.
Yeah, and he can't make stupid fouls. He's got to be smart. It's not something he's always been able to do consistently. And then I think the other thing is, they don't necessarily have to be winning the game after 3 quarters, but if they can be, within a couple of possessions late, you got to like your chances with Jalen Brunson. I know the Spurs have a lot of guys that can guard him. Obviously, Wemby can be a factor when Jalen's going to drive inside the arc and try to do one of his crazy runners, knowing Wemby's there. But, if anybody can make crazy shots over a 7'5" guy, I'd say Brunson. And if I'm the Spurs, I don't want the ball in his hands late in games.
Talk to you later. Thanks.
See you, man.
Ben Standing, everybody. All right, your chance, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Give me your finals pick, who's going to win it, in how many games, and give me a headline from this series. Max and I will do the same when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. NBA Finals Game 1 tonight in San Antonio. The Spurs are 4.5-point favorites. They are a minus 200 favorite to win the NBA Finals. Who do you like in how many games? And give me a headline from the series. So, I think San Antonio's a better team. I think Oklahoma City would have been a better team. I've been thinking throughout these playoffs that Oklahoma City would repeat. They are not going to repeat. I was dead wrong. But I really did think when we got to the conference finals that the winner of San Antonio, Oklahoma City would beat the Knicks, who I picked to beat the Cavaliers. But I feel a little bit differently now. I feel like the matchup is not, as difficult for New York as maybe I would have thought a week ago. There are a couple of things that I think are 100% important in this series. First of all, the Knicks have to play fast. I think it's going to be one of the things moving forward through the next several years when you're playing the Spurs in a best of 7. You've got to have the ability to play fast to try to face a defense that isn't set. Meaning Wembanyama's not sitting there waiting for your team in the middle of the paint or at the rim. You've got to try to play fast, even after made baskets, to force to play against a team that isn't set up defensively. That's advantage. The other team when Wembanyama can't set up defensively. And if you've watched Wembanyama throughout these playoffs, he does get tired. He's 7'5", and, as a big guy, you're usually going baseline to baseline. Smaller players usually go foul line to foul line, sometimes top of the key to top of the key, much shorter in terms of the ground you've got to cover. When you're a big who plays underneath the basket, both on offense and on defense. Now, he can shoot threes on offense, including in transition. But there is, in watching him, he tires. The stamina isn't what it will be maybe 3-4 years down the road as he becomes more physically mature. The Knicks have to play fast. If they are facing a consistent set defense, I think they're in massive trouble. I also think one of the benefits for the Knicks in watching them versus OKC is that they don't drive the ball as much. Minnesota was the same way against San Antonio. They drove the ball constantly, and you veer away from Wembanyama when you drive it, and then the ball's getting kicked out, and then you've got to knock down shots. The Knicks are different. They play with a big in Karl Anthony Towns who is really good at spacing the floor. His shooting and just shooting in general, the Knicks have led the postseason in three-point shooting percentage and in overall field goal percentage. They're going to have to shoot the ball well, and they're going to have to shoot it well from three. And they're not facing the Cleveland Cavaliers defensively. There's no James Harden to seek out for Jalen Brunson. Castle, these guys are really good defensively on the perimeter. And I think, officiating will matter in this series. Are they going to let the football nature of these NBA playoffs continue in the finals, or are they going to, call it a little bit more closely? That could be benefit New York. Also, it's huge that they end up having in this series, in my opinion, Mitchell Robinson. He's, he broke a pinky, and his status is kind of up in the air. They've got to have a Hartenstein sort of option to go against Wemby physically. He's 7 foot. He's physical. They got to have that option throughout this series. But I think the Knicks are a good enough shooting team. I think they will play fast. I think their home court advantage when they get back to the Garden is going to be insane. I think I like the Spurs, but in 7 games. I think this is going to go 7. And I think the headline is going to be that other players, not just Brunson for the Knicks, but other players like Josh Hart and Anunoby has a chance to become a star in this series. That's my headline. I just changed it from what I was going to give you. Anunoby becomes an absolute star. He is a two-way great player in this league that a lot of you don't know about. And he's going to have a great series. and he's going to have a series that is going to be MVP possible if the Knicks pull it off. But I like the Spurs in 7. Max, who you got and why?
Oh man, it's really tough because it's a rest versus rust thing for me. I kind of like the Knicks here just because they've been drubbing the hell out of teams. Like you said, they haven't lost in 41 days. Like that's ridiculous. So give me the Knicks in 7. However, my footnote will be that Victor Wembanyama still wins Finals MVP despite losing
on a losing team. Wow, controversial. Has that ever happened in the NBA Finals? I don't know. It's happened in the NFL. Super Bowl 5. Chuck Howley, linebacker, Dallas Cowboys, won the MVP, and they lost the Super Bowl to the Colts 16-13.
Jerry West, the only player in NBA history to win the Finals MVP while playing for the losing team.
Was that against the Knicks?
It was against the Celtics.
Okay, against the Celtics. All right, guys, go quickly here. Skip, go. Who you got and why? How many games, too?
Mainly because of my heart, the Knicks. I agree with everything you said, Kevin, as to why that OG could be the star, and he will guard Wemby sometime because he's got the build to do it. And the key question is, can Brunson get his shot off in this series against these, long-arm defenders? As you
they
got
to play fast. That's how they've got to play fast. They've got to face a defense that doesn't have Wemby sitting there and Castle and their perimeter defenders set.
I think he will be able to. He had 61 against him a couple years ago, of course, before Dylan, Harper, and Castle were there. But still, I think he will be able to get his shot off, and the Knicks will win in 6.
Got it. Thank you, Skip. Big Tony. Sorry I missed you earlier. That was my fault. Go.
Don't worry
answer
about
the
it,
question.
Hey, look here.
Answer the question. Did you have the Mount Rushmore of Spurs? The first 3 are obvious, right? Duncan, Gervin, and Robinson. Who's 4?
And then I texted you. And I said, "Is Kawhi a Spur?"
Yeah, but Kawhi won the NBA Finals MVP. But I don't think that. Go ahead. You're the Spurs fan.
If we consider him a Spur, then if we consider him a Spur, then it's him. If not, then it's Tony. Now look here, Spurs in 6. Brunson is going to have to work. He can't hide on defense this time. He going to have to cover somebody, and that somebody's going to smoke him. And for you folks who haven't been paying attention, like I told you, Kevin, before these even started, I said, watch Dylan Harper and Castle. These folks don't see him. I see him every game because I watch all their games. And I'm telling you, they're going to be absolute monsters. They're going to be all over the place. Now I'm conflicted because my man Josh Hart, I've known since he was 6 years old. He's in this damn game. So I texted him the other day. I said, Slim, I love you, but you can win it next year. Let Wemby win it this year. He can win the joint next year. I don't care. But look here, Spurs in 6, Brunson. Oh, and Towns. Towns. My headline, Towns sucks or something like that because he's gonna be faking. He's gonna be out there on the post shooting his little 3-pointer. Nah, Slim.
He's not gonna do Holmgren, but I know what you're saying. I could see it with him. By the way, Josh Hart's the one player that could come up big because they'll leave him open when they go to try to if they end up doubling, he's the guy they'll leave open. And he made Cleveland pay obviously in game 2.
Real quick. Real quick. I wanted to see him and Castle because both of them got attitude problems. But if San Antonio would have lost, I would have loved to see him and Caruso go at it because you talking about two jokers who ain't going to back down. Man, they'd have had to call the police up in that joint, man. You take it easy, baby.
Later. All right, Paulie, who you got? How many games? Give me a headline.
Big guy, L to the W, man.
Yeah.
Orange and blue skies, baby. Knicks in 6. Come on, Brunson Finals MVP. Look, everything you said about the Knicks, how they need to play, the Spurs need to play the same way. The Knicks defend. They're probably the best defensive team in the playoffs. Where's San Antonio? Who's going to be their consistent second scorer? I can ring off 3 players for the Knicks, OG, Mikal Bridges, Towns. But who's going to be the first consistent second scorer? Right?
Let me just say this. First of all, I don't agree with you that they're the best defensive team in the postseason. I don't. Not with Brunson out there. In terms of their other scores, I'll tell you a guy who could absolutely have a big series is Fox. I thought he was crucial in Game 7. But take your pick. They had they had 7 players in double figures in Game 7, so they got a lot of guys, including off the bench, that can score. So I don't know what team you've been watching. I'm all for. I'm with you that the Knicks have a shot, no doubt, but they're not the best defensive team in the postseason, and San Antonio's got a lot of options beyond Wemby, in my opinion.
Listen, remember, I picked the Spurs to start the playoffs.
I know you did.
West, I know what
I gotta go.
What they got.
I gotta go. Anthony in DC. Sorry I missed you, and everybody else on hold. Back tomorrow. Chris is next.